Okay, talking about the Formula 1 news, major developments at Ferrari. Reports have it there could be engine penalties on the way for the Brazilian Grand Prix, but also, what about the future of their driver lineup after the result in Mexico with Ollie Bearman? Big questions being raised and sources now suggesting that Ferrari might look to fast-track Bearman from the Ferrari Academy into the main team at the Scuderia, replacing Lewis Hamilton as soon as 2027. Would that be a good idea for the long term of Ferrari? What does it mean for Hamilton? But also, is it even possible, especially if Charles Leclerc might be looking to the exit door as well, depending on their performance in 26? Very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Plenty to get through today. Happy Halloween. Lots of thoughts on this in yesterday's video, because if you guys saw this angle, another angle of Liam Lawson nearly crashing into a couple of marshals, you can see that the line that Lawson takes here, by the way, like Lawson takes this line, you can also see that Lawson at this moment, he doesn't steer as far to the right as he could have done what might be the more traditional racing line. Look, it's not even worth talking about how this is somehow Lawson's fault. There is also an argument that at this point, this marshal can probably see Lawson approaching the corner, but yet he just still decides to run across the road anyway. Look, it wasn't Lawson's fault. The fault was whoever was responsible for the marshals being there, be that the marshals themselves or some of the communication. That's who was at fault. Now, if you guys didn't see this yesterday, the basically like a federation over in Mexico said that Lawson, it seemed to imply that he should at least take some of the blame, which seemed to me like a pretty outrageous perspective to take. Look, it wasn't long ago that Lawson and Perez were barreling down the start-finish straight in Mexico together, and Lawson threw up the middle finger, right? So maybe that's got a part to play. But the FIA actually came out today and said, look, it was certainly not his fault. So it's actually great to see some of the reaction here of the people in the stands. You can see, I mean, look at this guy, right? He's got his head in his hands, as it were, right? Watching this unfold in real time. So pretty remarkable. He was not at fault in the instance, say the FIA. This is the season so far. Russell with a couple, Verstappen with a fair few, 3 of the most recent 5, but Lando back on top in Mexico makes him right now the championship favourite, and Oscar Piastri hasn't won now since Zandvoort, and that feels like rather a long time ago. Before we get back to McLaren, because a couple of interesting things to say on the title battle there. The Red Bull 22, the RB22, is set to be unveiled on the 15th of January. Now, you might notice that seems rather early, and yes, it is. Usually we see cars revealed in early to mid-February. But this year, by early to mid-February, testing is already very well underway for the new cars, right? There's a lot of testing this new season. I think it's the 26th of January that testing begins. Abu Dhabi is on like the 7th or something of December. So there is practically 6 weeks between Abu Dhabi and testing for next year. It's going to be a very hectic winter period, right? Usually winter things slow down a bit. That's probably not going to be the case this year. There will be so much talk about these new cars, and they're going to hit the track in January, which means the teams are going to launch their liveries. We can probably predict what the Red Bull is going to look like, but we'll see if we get surprised on that front. I think we know what the livery is going to be, but it's going to be in Detroit, home to the headquarters of engine partner Ford, a joint event with Racing Bulls. So they're not doing, I think, the same thing as they did last year, where they did the F1 75 thing. They revealed all the cars at the same time. Maybe they'll do that again at some point, but the timelines mean that this is what they're going to do. It's only middle of January we're going to get a look at the new car. So fascinating stuff. Speaking of Red Bull, they are still very much in the Constructors' Championship fight for second place. This is an interesting graphic. It's not especially a good one, just because still can't see how many points the teams have. But you can see that for some time, Ferrari was sitting in 4th position in the championship. Then they jumped up to 2nd for some time over Mercedes, and then it swapped around again over the last few rounds. And as of the most recent Grand Prix, Ferrari are back in front. So it's not a championship that many people massively care about unless you work for the teams and want the bonuses. But Ferrari are at 356 points, Mercedes at 355, Red Bull at 346. So 10 points separates the 3 teams. Who's going to win is a very good question, actually. Let's think about the Grand Prix. We've got Brazil, Las Vegas, Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Look, if Mercedes pull off another miracle in Las Vegas and just magically have the best car because they look after their tyres so much better, I don't even know if Mercedes fully understand why they were so good last year in Las Vegas, but they were. And if they could do that again, I think they'd be favourites. Like, if any of these teams get to 1-2, then yeah, I think they would be firmly favourites. Red Bull aren't going to get a 1-2. I think we can relatively safely assume that. Could Max get the job done anyway? Possibly. I think that it probably will be either one of Ferrari or Mercedes. Antonelli's scored some better points outside of the Europeans rounds in general, right? Like, put Antonelli back on some of those European tracks. He did not have a good stint in the middle of the season. But on the other circuits, he's done pretty well in terms of point scoring. And Ferrari, despite their Lift Coast 25, or whatever you want to call their car this year, they've still got a pretty solid driver pairing, as we know. More to say on that in a second. Before we get there, a couple of things actually on McLaren. This is an interesting one. They're looking to auction off their new car before the season has even started. So apparently on the 5th of December, they're going to auction off next year's car. Now, the car's not been built yet. It won't be available to buy until like 2028, at least a couple of years after that season is over. So it's definitely a unique thing that Zach Brown is cooking up. It's actually kind of impressive. They can sell their car. I mean, they want $10 million, or that's the rumour anyway. They're going to get $10 million for a car that won't be visible to see. The buyer won't be able to see it. They're simply buying a piece of paper that says, in 3 years, we will give you this car. And we'll see what happens there. This is another interesting thing that the race have to say on Lando Norris. I actually really like this from Lando, if this is true. So in qualifying, if you guys have ever played the F1 games or anything, you'll know that you've got the delta, right? The delta comes up in the top right corner of the screen, and the drivers have the delta on their dash, right, on their steering wheel. It shows them their lap with respect to their previous lap or with respect to pole, whatever they decide. Now, apparently since Monaco, where of course he had a phenomenal Grand Prix result and qualifying sub 110 was pretty remarkable, Lando's deactivated this. So on his steering wheel, he doesn't know what the lap time is. He presumably knows roughly, what the lap time is. He can feel how quick he thinks he's going, but he doesn't actually know. He doesn't want the distraction of that, and maybe he believes it adds some level of pressure, right? Like if he ends up coming out of the first corner a quarter of a tenth down, a couple of hundredths down, he's, got to push harder here or whatever. Maybe for Norris that doesn't work. For some drivers, they like it, right? But I think with Lando's approach, with Lando's mentality, look, it seems to have been working. It's not like since Monaco he hasn't still had some off-qualifying sessions. He has. But in recent Grand Prix, especially in Mexico, he's been pretty cold. And I think Mexico was especially impressive just because the first lap, the first run in Q3 was not provisional pole. Leclerc had that, but it was a very solid lap. And then he went even faster by like 3-4 tenths in the second run, purple, right? Like, that's exactly the way that you want to do it, right? Your first lap is solid and respectable, and then you put everything on the table. Maybe this is just a small thing, but something that's helping Lando get to that point, because we know that Lando managing his mentality is a key factor in whether he succeeds or not. If Lando could get the best out of himself every single weekend, he would have wrapped up this championship probably already, to be honest. But that's not how it works, and if there were perfect drivers in Formula 1, it would be a pretty boring sport. Although I will say that I think in some way we've been spoiled over the last almost 15, 20 years. I mean, you go from Schumacher through to, Hamilton, Vettel, then Hamilton again, then really Verstappen. Okay, there's been another couple of winners in that mix. But I think my point is that those guys I've just mentioned, monstrously consistent, right? When it comes to consistent execution week on week, week in, week out, those guys were just always there. They didn't really have big swings and roundabouts in form, right? You saw it occasionally with some of the drivers, but mostly they turn up every weekend and executed, right? Whereas, before Schumacher, really, and okay, there were obviously many great drivers. But my point is that for most drivers, even most world champions, you could argue, they have ups and downs in form throughout the season. You're not just going to see a metronomically consistent driver, but, with Schumacher, the way that he put things forward in terms of like health and nutrition and like mentality and execution, Vettel, monstrously consistent at a time. Hamilton really needs no explanation on that front. And then Verstappen, while volatile, when he's got the machinery, he's always getting the best out of the car. 2023 was a prime example. So the fact that Piastri had a great stint of form, then he's on a downturn. The fact that Norris had a difficult stint of form, now he's on an upturn. In the grand scheme of Formula 1 history, that shouldn't be a massive surprise. There's 24 races, right? You're not expecting drivers to be on the same level every weekend. There are many reasons why drivers and the car driver compromise and balance will have peaks and valleys throughout a season. So the fact that we've got this entertaining championship battle shouldn't probably be too much of a surprise. On some level, we've just been used to title winners that just win all the time. And that's not always been the case. Now, speaking of Ferrari and Hamilton, let's get into that, because this weekend was Ollie Bearman's best weekend in Formula 1. Like, he was he the driver of the weekend? I think probably yes. Obviously, you can say Lando as well, but I think in the grand scheme of things, you would have to give the nod to Ollie Bearman. Could have been a podium if they'd have tried for it, Haas. They could have easily tried to leave Bearman out on the one stop to get the podium. Probably the decision they made in the end was the sensible one. But with this big result, all of a sudden there's talk about the future at Ferrari, right? Now, to be honest, Bearman has had his ups and downs this season, as you would expect from a rookie. Couple of crashes under red flag conditions. Silverstone was hilarious in hindsight. You know, there's been some good moments and bad moments, but the pace has clearly been there. As I've said a few times, Bearman to me is like the ideal rookie because, yeah, he crashes sometimes or he has occasional moments he's over the line, but he's quick and he's learning. And Haas even mentioned after Mexico, like, Bearman knows now when and when not to drive within the limit, drive within himself to a certain extent. That's getting him better results. And his level of execution against Esteban Ocon, like, I think Ocon is a good driver. I've never thought he was especially great. But Bearman's kind of like smoking him this season, given their respective experience, right? It's very, very impressive. A number of occasions recently, Ocon's been out in Q1, Bearman's through to Q3. And yeah, when he gets to Q3, he's probably not qualifying top 5, but, you know, what can you expect in the Haas? And he's scored a load of P11s this season, a bunch of P10s, P9s. So, like, his points haul didn't look that good because he didn't really have a star result until Mexico. So, yeah, Bearman finally put it all together on a weekend. It was extremely impressive, but, you know, it's not like Bearman was like, oh my God, this guy is like actually really good. It's like, no, I think people who were watching knew that this performance was there for Bearman. It was probably just a matter of time. So, what next, right? He's part of the Ferrari Driver Academy. He's driving for Haas. They've got Ferrari power. It's been a talking point, frankly, long before Mexico, for ball knowers, wheel knowers, whatever you want to say, that Bearman to Ferrari has been a conversation to be had. But of course, after Mexico, people are going crazy about it, oh, like, you know, get him in the Ferrari. I will also say, given that Haas are the smallest team, they have fewer resources than anybody else. I'm not expecting much from them next year, right? Like, their car right now, they've brought some upgrades, it's actually pretty good. They're fighting hard in the championship. Maybe next year they surprise me, but given the other competition, I'm just not expecting Haas next year to be that good, right? So I think if Bearman is to prove himself, this is the season to do it, and he's doing it, right? Absolutely, undisputedly. And next year, maybe the Haas is terrible. As I say, there's a lot of complication in these new rules. Haas, yeah, they will buy the Ferrari engine, but they have the smallest technical team of anyone. It's going to be a serious challenge, and maybe Ikomatsu could cook something up. We'll see. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Haas fall back on the grid next calendar season, as it were. So therefore, this is pretty critical, and this result for Bearman may be crucial even as far away as 2027 when decisions might be made. So rumours have it, Hamilton's got a 2-year deal, 25-26. After that, it's, you know, extensions on both sides are possible. I'll say from Hamilton's perspective, he doesn't want to retire before Alonso, that is for sure. But if Ferrari turn up next year and the car isn't very good, do you think Hamilton's going to want to stay anyway? Like, maybe it would be, you know what, it's time to call it a day, right? Like, if Ferrari don't get next year's regulation right and it's going to take a long time to rebuild, is Hamilton going to want to stick around? Possibly not, but also, is Leclerc going to want to stick around? Almost certainly not. So the hypothetical scenario that they're talking about here really is that the car is actually pretty good, because, like, if Leclerc leaves, Bearman probably ends up there anyway, let's be honest, right? Like, Bearman's not going to turn down a drive at Ferrari. And if Leclerc does decide to get out of there after 2026, then probably Bearman gets one of those seats. It would be, frankly, a big surprise if he didn't. The discussion here is that they're considering not renewing Hamilton's contract because of his struggles and putting Bearman in instead. Now, this is interesting. I know there's a lot of talk about, oh, Hamilton, where has he been this season? But I actually think Hamilton's, yeah, he's not scored a podium. He did win the race back in China. This weekend, if not for the penalty, it was a pretty good chance of a podium there as well. His pace has been solid, albeit unspectacular. But I actually think this season, yeah, the numbers don't look great, but it's not been a bad season for Hamilton, really. If you look at the comparisons, right, this is from Tomo's video the other day. He was looking at qualifying head-to-head pace throughout the 24 qualifying sessions this season. Hamilton's been much closer to Leclerc in qualifying recently, having come to grips a little bit more with how best to handle this car. This is a Leclerc arguably in his prime, right? Like, this is a prime Charles Leclerc, considered to be easily of the quality to be a world championship level driver. You know, many people say put Leclerc against Verstappen and see how it goes, right? Like, that's a genuine talking point. You've got a 40-year-old Hamilton holding his own, right? A tenth and a half off Leclerc over a season in qualifying is very impressive for any driver, right? Especially with Hamilton just joining, and that gap has come down as the season has gone on. So yeah, the results don't look great if you look at the points, you look at the podiums and all this. But if you consider the nuance, Hamilton's not been bad this season at all, really. Like, people are going to say, oh, he's struggling, this, that, and the other. But I think given the circumstances, Hamilton's doing about as well as you could have expected him to do, really. Given the car isn't good, the car's nowhere, the car's got so many issues with it. And we know that Hamilton, you know, when he really thrives on a car that gets a sniff of the championship, right, then he's all over it. So I think, you know, to really judge Hamilton at Ferrari, you're going to have to see him in a better car, frankly. And maybe Ferrari will do that next year, maybe they won't. But the idea to get rid of Hamilton after a couple of years and bring in Bearman, look, Hamilton's aging, Alonso's aging. Is Hamilton ever going to get back to his best? No. If he had the right machinery in the right circumstances, could he still be good enough to win a world championship? I think possibly yes. But also I get the idea of wanting to put Bearman in the car, right? I mean, look, let's say next year Ferrari actually do have a great machine and Hamilton is struggling with it, Leclerc's doing a great job, then, and maybe Hamilton recognises himself that, well, you know, maybe my level's dropped a bit, I'm not quite where Leclerc is, it's going to be tough for me to win the 8th. Then, you know, from both sides, right? But I don't know. I don't expect, given all that they've given to this Hamilton-Ferrari relationship, them to end it in kind of sour terms. But intrigued to your thoughts on that in the comments below. The other thing to mention on Ferrari is around potential power unit penalties. Now, Hamilton already took another one in Belgium, so he's probably going to be okay. But it is plausible that they might take another engine for Leclerc. Now, of the upcoming tracks, where would you want to take the penalty? Not Abu Dhabi, not Qatar for sure. Vegas, maybe. I mean, look, Leclerc's done some good overtaking there. That's not impossible. But Brazil, we know there's multiple overtaking opportunities, as we know in Brazil. It makes sense. If you are going to take a power unit penalty, as Hamilton did in 2021, it's something to think about. Is this the secret to Ferrari maintaining that second place? Or is it about trying to win a race, right? Because if they put a new engine in Leclerc's car, he takes a penalty, but now he's got a rocket ship engine, right? He's got that spicy engine that we had on that Mercedes in 2021, and they can max out the engine for the next 4 Grand Prix. He'd probably get some good overtaking done in Brazil anyway, and then in a circuit like Vegas, I mean, if he's got one engine which only has to do 3 or 4 Grand Prix, it's gonna be a rocket ship, right? So that's something to think about for Ferrari. If they want to go all out for a win, probably take a penalty, and then you've got 3 upcoming Grand Prix to try and actually win a race. Is that the best strategy? What will they actually do? All these are very good questions. Just before we close out the video, though, a quick comment on the weather, because the weather can and does and has and will again affect things in Brazil. This is how it currently looks. So, Max Verstappen last year won in remarkable conditions in Brazil. The current forecast is that on Friday there's a 75% chance of rain. On the Saturday and the Sunday there's a 90 and 60% respectively chance of rain. So it is very likely that rain at least has some parts to play this weekend. Especially, let's not forget, there's a sprint, right, this upcoming weekend as well. So there's racing on the Saturday and the Sunday. It's going to be spectacular, especially if it does rain. It's also going to be a big throwback to last year, right? Because the McLarens were nice last year when it wasn't raining. When it did, that's when things significantly turned around. So I'm sure this is music to the ears right now of Max Verstappen in this championship fight. It may be one of those Grand Prix where, you know, I don't want to say the title is decided because it's not going to be decided in Brazil, but if one of the championship contenders puts in a really stellar performance and the others don't, that could be a key deciding factor. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.